out and look pretty. So what we're going to talk about today basically is got sort of two sections. One is sort of how I got interested in bluebirds as a research species and some facts about them. Some interesting facts that will make them attractive to all of you, I think. And then we're also learning about how they react to urban noises. Now, urban noises affect people and everything else that lives in cities. And so we're using these guys as a model for how humans maybe should quiet things down. We want to live a better life in urban areas. And then we'll talk at the very end how to encourage bluebirds in landscapes and keep them happy where we live and work. I first got interested in bluebirds because I had my first PhD student here in Florida, who's now a professor at Santa Fe College. He did a couple studies to answer the question of what birds like to hang out on farms that are also beneficial for the farmers, right? And specifically then, he was interested in what are the birds that come into fields and eat the most pest bugs. Now, we've heard of starlings and other birds that get in fields and eat grains, but if you have a vegetable patch or flowers or some other things that birds typically don't eat, what they go in there for are insects. And insects, of course, are generally bad for plants. Not all of them are, but so that was his idea. So what he did was he went to farms, large farms, small farms, and he surveyed in the edges of those farm fields and also in the middle. And he was looking to see what birds were on the edges and also then out in the crops actually foraging on insects. And what he found was that across all the farms he looked at, if a farm had mixed crops in the field, that would attract more insect-eating birds than monocrops. Now that also works for gardens. If you guys are growing any kind of plantings or gardens in the landscape, the more mixture of plants you have in a place, the more the insectivorous birds are going to be curious and interested to come in there and find insects. He also found that in these sort of large, even monocrop fields, you'd have a lot more birds foraging on insects in the fields if there was forested habitat on the edges of those fields. Forest and actually suburbs also would, if they were right on the edge, would also bring more birds out into the fields to eat insects. Then Greg did another study where he actually went to farms and he planted sunflower rows, these big, tall, these are, I forget what variety, but it's the really tall one that gets taller than really tall people. And he thought that that would attract birds in as perches from which then they could go out into the fields even further, in addition to the birds that are brought in by this forested habitat near the field. And what he found was just adding sunflower intercrops to the fields greatly increased the number of birds and the number of insects per hour that were eaten by birds out in those vegetable fields. And plus, since we paid for the sunflowers and actually planted them in the fields, the growers were ecstatic because they cut all the sunflowers we planted and sold them at market. And one guy told us he paid his entire fuel budget for the year just on the flowers we planted. Couple of rows of these things in his field. It's just that people would spend a lot of money on a bouquet of cut sunflowers. So it was a win-win project all around. The farmers just extolled the virtues of the birds that came in their fields. And after that study, all the birds that we found to be important in that study are also highly active in gardens, just on smaller landscapes, bigger landscapes. If you have a vegetable garden, then these are the birds that are out there eating the insects, all right? And the top 3 pest-eating birds in the crops on the farms that we found, and also that I see just in my garden, I plant all these same crops. I love a good kale crop. And the mockingbirds are out there picking off the grubs, and cardinals also eat a lot of caterpillars and moth larvae and beetle larvae. And then, of course, the eastern bluebird was number 3 on the farms in terms of the species that were in the fields eating insects. So here's 3 really common species that you should bow down to every time you see them, because if you get a good tomato out of your garden, it's probably because these guys have been eating the bugs that have been eaten on your tomatoes. So it's a good thing, these guys. So we ended up, I got interested in bluebirds after that study. And recently I've found them to be wonderfully useful in research, in part because if you put up an S box in the right habitat, a bluebird will occupy it. It's like that baseball movie, you know, if you build it, they will come. They're so easy to work with. If you put up a bunch of boxes and give them a lot of choices, you'll definitely have birds in boxes that you can then study. So I'm going to showcase just a couple of studies, 3 studies that we have been conducting recently, all or in part on the UF campus, which is very urban, very heavily landscaped. Oh my gosh, these days, really landscaped. And so that might give you an idea of how you can fit some nature into a heavily landscaped property. So the first study that one of my students did was to test box types to find out what bluebirds like the best, like what kind of boxes. There's a lot of crazy boxes out there. So we asked them which ones they like. We tested if bluebirds selected quieter boxes over noisy boxes. That was another study where put out boxes and then the students assessed the frequency of occupancy based on the noise level at the nest. And then we've been following that up with this a couple of studies that are related. And that is in the noisy boxes that the birds nested in, did they have worse nesting success than in the quiet boxes like we would have expected? And then finally, we did find an effective noise. And so the next study was to put little infrared spy cams in the nest boxes to figure out why noise was causing nesting failures. So we'll sort of work through those studies real quick here. And then we'll finish off with some recommendations about how to integrate these lovely birds into landscapes and how not to annoy them once you've got them there. All right. So you might not know we have 3 species of bluebirds in North America, and they're kind of named for where they live: Western, Eastern, and Mountain. And we're going to talk about the Eastern bluebird, which is the most widespread, and especially all across the Eastern seaboard. But I encourage you to go out west and see these other 2, especially the mountain bluebird. Talk about shiny, shiny bluebird. Boy, oh boy. A bit about bluebirds. They eat a lot of different bugs, you'll be happy to know. They eat crickets, they eat mayflies, dragonflies, they eat anything that looks like a caterpillar or a grub, beetle larvae, lepidop larvae of all kinds. They love them, stuff them in the mouths of their babies at a great rate. And they nest, they mostly take things off the ground. So of course they even go after the nasty mole crickets, which I'm assuming a lot of you might not like. I don't think I like them, but bluebirds like them. So that's a good thing. They will nest in cavities, either naturally made or human made. In fact, nest boxes are extremely popular, and the birds, like I said, if you put one up, they'll occupy it if it's at all useful. And you can tell the male from the female here. The male is brighter, the female's a little duller. But of course, you see the females doing the work here with the nesting material, putting it in the box. Actually, the male bluebirds do a lot of stuff too, so I'm not going to knock them. But a bit about bluebirds, the history. Why are there so many bluebird boxes everywhere? It's because they almost went extinct. From 1920 to 1970, there was a major decline, and all the birders thought for certain that bluebirds were going to be extinct. So there were a lot of reasons for this. During that time, you know, we hadn't gotten a handle on DDT yet. There was a loss of habitat, other pesticides, weather changes. People were moving a lot of forests during that time, and trees, snags where they nested in. And there's an influx of house cats during that time that eat these guys, especially the babies. And then one of the main reasons is that we had our exotic house sparrow and European starling populations really blossomed in that period between 1920 and 1970. And they also occupied the natural cavities that these guys were using. And so we quickly learned that by putting up a ton of nest boxes for bluebirds, we started getting tons of bluebirds back into the landscape, especially because when people are managing the bluebird boxes that they put up, they can actually control the exotics and keep the space open for the native bluebirds. And so really that one management technique, which the public and scientists and conservationists and activists and environmentalists everywhere, everybody loves to put up nest boxes and monitor them. So the bird came back, and it's doing really well now. And I find that it's I don't know if it relies on nest boxes, but it certainly appreciates them, and we'll use them whenever it gets a chance. And there's a lot of different designs. We'll talk about that right now. So there are a lot of weird designs out there, a lot of designs that seem to work well. And the reason we did this study, Julie Perot, she did this study for her undergraduate project. There's an old guy named Louis Nipper, bless his soul. Some of you might know him. I don't know. Once he heard I was dealing with bluebirds, he makes these things at home, and he passed off something like 200 of these things to me. He just unloaded them. He drive his Lincoln Continental up to my lab and offload 50 of these boxes at a time, hoping I could use them. And I've been using this style of box. And so we actually compared the two styles. I've always been suspicious of this one because of the narrowing at the bottom. So that my student actually tested these two up against each other. And this is what she found. You put them all over campus in pairs, right? So the birds could choose which type of box they wanted to nest in. And the thing is, they chose them at an equal rate. So the birds chose the Gilbertson and the Peterson box at the same rate. But if you notice these two red and green bars here, the Gilbertson box produced more hatchlings from the eggs. This is the hatchling stage of bluebirds when they're just out of the egg, they're just little chunks of meat with some fluff on them. And they come out of the egg looking like that. And so we count the number of hatchlings per egg in the nest to get a hatching rate. And then once the hatchlings are growing, we call them nestlings. And then once they fledge from the box, we call them fledglings. And so these guys are just free of the nest and they're looking kind of young and dumb, and they are, but we count those guys as they come out of the nest to see what the total productivity is. And as you can see here, the Gilbertson box performs better in terms of producing offspring. The Peterson box did not produce, it's a whole 1 or 2 chicks less per nest box on average that come out of the nest box at the end of the season. So that's a significant decline in reproductive, productivity. So the other thing we noticed was that the birds that were growing up in the Gilbertson box were actually bigger in a very important dimension, and that is their wings were longer. So this thing called the wing chord is the distance between this joint right here, which is basically the wrist of the bird, and the very tips of the flight feathers when they come out of the nest. We measure that, and it was a good 10 millimeters longer for birds in the Gilbertson box. So again, the Gilbertson box outperformed the Peterson box in another measure of sort of chick fitness. The longer their wings, the easier it's going to be for them to fly out of the way of a predator once they first get out of the nest. So we thought that was an important measure as well. So we definitely prefer the Gilbertson box in all of our research now. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to use all those donated boxes. But that being said, there are other box types out there that are just as good or maybe even better than this one, but they all haven't been tested side by side. So as researchers move forward, we'll know more and more and more. But there are some definitely well-tested box models that I'll talk about. But this is a good one for Florida. And it basically boils down to, I think this nest box just didn't give them enough room to grow as youngsters. And so some of them just didn't survive. And the ones that did survive were just cramped. Didn't get enough food or whatever it was to have their wings be shorter. So a nice roomy box is what we decided we were going to use. So then we moved on to looking at effects of noise. So given that the birds were all on campus, and campus is really noisy. I don't know if you've been to the UF campus lately, but my gosh, especially during the pandemic, there was so much construction. I thought that was a worse scourge almost than the all the things we had to do to deal with the pandemic. Construction everywhere, and it was so loud. So anyhow, we're interested now in how the noise affects these guys. So the first study was to put out all these nest boxes, and now they're all the same type of box, but they're in areas with different levels of noise. So Isabella Plummer was a student who did this study, and after we put the boxes out, she walked around to every single box and using a simple app on her phone, put it right over the box and just take a whole bunch of readings over a series of days at each box to get a mean noise level for each box. And we found lots of boxes on campus that were in the 55 to 65 dBA range. And then if you were near any of the really heavily trafficked roads, so this is Archer Road, and up near going up to Shands here, and then this is 34th Street, which is both of those roads are extremely busy here all the time, really noisy. And 70 to 90 dBA on average at the nest boxes where we were measuring it. And then we had a lot of quieter nests as well in the interior portions of campus and down here in some organic gardens and some other quiet areas. So what we found is that, again, the bluebird was not very discriminating in its choice of boxes that were chosen for nesting and those that were not occupied had similar levels of noise. There was more variation in the unoccupied boxes, but the mean levels were more or less the same. So the birds weren't sensitive. We thought they'd choose quieter boxes, but they weren't sensitive to that. What they were sensitive to was the amount of grass around the box. So this y-axis here is a measure of percentage of grass. And so they nested more frequently where there was more grass around the box. And that's, they like to perch up high above grassy areas and drop down into short grass. That's where they get all their food. So this kind of a habitat obviously is what they want. And they also don't want anything touching the pole that supports the box and so forth and so on. So it's very clear that traditionally people know that that's what bluebirds like in terms of nesting habitat. This idea of can they sense the noise quality environment around them or not, this is sort of new that we're looking at. So just to give you a sense of noise levels and your own discomfort, all right, this graph kind of shows as we go up the decibel A scale. 0 is when, you're really not hearing anything at all. They're just super quiet. Then this is all scaled to human hearing. And so by the time you're up here, you're basically losing your hearing. It's so loud. And you start getting ear damage at longer exposure periods within this range from like 50, 60, this is the low range of any sort of damage that could occur, up to sort of concert level. My husband loves to go to concerts, and if I have to go, I have earplugs in because I need to protect my bird listening ears. And at 120 decibels in a good rock concert, your ears are suffering and declining in their ability to hear after that. So it's an important thing to think about. And just in general, in these ranges here that might not be destroying your hearing, they're definitely destroying your concentration. They might be making your mood worse and so on and so forth. Basically, noise drives everybody with ears crazy, and urban environments are far too noisy. The EPA suggests that we try to keep things around 50, 60, but the urban environments are way noisier than that typically. And so it's an important issue that if the bluebirds are suffering, then we're suffering too. So I sort of use the bluebirds as an easy way to get at the problem. Now, most of the noise that we're dealing with in these studies are in this range here from 60 up to 90 or 100, can get pretty loud in certain parts of campus. Of course, here's some of the things that can happen at really high noise levels: hearing loss, psychological effects. At lower levels, you certainly can be distracted and make bad decisions. If there's you're listening to music and not paying attention, in the car, then you can make a bad decision there. You can, if you don't sleep well at night, then you might wake up irritated, aggressive, having mood swings, and you'll make more bad decisions during your day. Then, of course, lots of noise consistently at the wrong time in your life can cause a lot of stress, which causes physiological changes in your own body. And that can lead to heart disease, mental illness. And there's even records of people exposed to so much noise, they go into a coma. I mean, it can be very, very difficult to deal with. Now, just a little bit of if we go back to 1910, UF campus was pretty darn quiet, and there's lots of grass for bluebirds, right? It was like a big bluebird habitat back then. But UF today is very built up. There is a lot of noise, but there's also a lot of green, and not only trees, but there's also a bit of grass, although it's not nearly as much as it was just 5-10 years ago. It's disappearing really fast. So I don't know how much longer we'll be able to put bluebird boxes on campus, but here we are back to our distribution of bluebird boxes. And now, knowing that the birds have chosen equally, both noisy and quiet boxes, that sets us up to be able to study the effects of noise while they actually nest in those boxes. And so that's what we're going to talk about next then, is a couple of studies where we're looking at, first of all, we just monitored the bluebird boxes and looked at whether they fledged more or less young in the noisy places. And then just recently, I had a student graduate who finished a study where we put the spy cameras in the nests to see how the female is actually reacting to the noise that she's experiencing in the box. So in any case, when we run a nest box study, we have to monitor the boxes to determine what's happening inside. So we use the Gilbertson box. we place about 100 to 150 per season. And then usually about 40 to 50 of them are occupied at that rate. Then we monitor the boxes every 3 to 5 days, have an army of students out there checking to see when the first egg is laid. And as soon as the first egg is laid, then we decide whether it's, what we're going to do with the box. And then we count the eggs, hatchlings, and fledglings. There's a lot of things we can measure about that, but basically for these studies, we're looking at the hatching rate as a measure of nest success. Just be sure we have time. Just a couple of minutes. I'm just going to play this to let you see what the nesting cycle is like for these guys. I'm going to speed it up though, because we don't need to see it this slowly. It's hard work being a mommy bird, I'm telling you, or a daddy. Even after they're out, you still got to feed them, the teenagers, right? Finally, they learn how to do it on their own. Yeah, it's a long cycle for them, but for us, that whole process takes about a month total. So this is every day in the nest. The chicks are getting visibly bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I can check a box. I can tell you how many days they've been growing from hatching, and then finally they fledge and everybody's gone at day 20. So that's what the monitoring is like. The students love doing it. They love opening up a nest box to find out what's in it. And my first student then who studied the noise was Yue, and she was interested in just whether higher noise on campus causes hatching success declines. And she did in fact find that was true. So if this is an index of hatching success, 1.5 is 100% hatching. We had the quiet boxes by far had the highest nesting success, and the noisiest nests had the least hatching success. So something about the noisy environments was keeping the eggs from hatching at a full rate. So some of the eggs were not developing and then not hatching in the nests. And her work spurred us to start thinking about why. So one of the things that she did is she put these little eye button sensors in the nest cup, and we were able to see the daily activities of a female bluebird on the nest. You can see a typical nesting bout here where she gets on the nest right here, and then the temperature goes up, and then it drops when she gets off, and then it goes up again when she gets on. We can measure the length of these nesting bouts. But one thing we noticed was that in some of the noisier nests, it seemed like these little tiny drops of 2 degrees centigrade or less were happening with greater frequency in the noisy boxes. And that leads us to think maybe the females aren't doing sort of normal incubation behavior, that they might be more restless on the nest. And so that's what we started to look at. And in fact, this doesn't look like a super impressive graph, but as hatching success declines here with this line, you're actually getting more and more of those small temperature fluctuations per day in UA's data. And that made us ask the question of whether, if in quiet nests, maybe bluebirds, they sit tighter on the eggs and they don't move as much, they get to sleep more and rest more quietly than perhaps nests that are in noise, where the females might be more wakeful. They might rise up off the eggs just enough to let the cool weather temperatures in the early part when they're nesting mostly in March and April when it can still be cool at night. And so we thought those temperatures might be affecting the eggs because the females were not incubating properly. So she did calculate a few more things from her work. The typical egg temperature for hatching for any egg of a small bird has to be between 35 and 39 degrees C. And you can see that in our quiet boxes, our eye button temperatures were approaching that range. Actually, we don't think the eye buttons stayed as warm as the actual eggs did. So, but these are obviously a lot warmer than the eye buttons in nest boxes where it was more noisy. So that lead us to think that the female behavior could be attached to this drop in temperature in the noisy boxes. So Yue had to graduate. We couldn't finish the story with her, but enter Odile, and she was really interested in filming the females in the nest box to find out what their activity levels were in the noisier and the quieter areas. So, you know, a typical nest box camera will, see if I can get it to show you a video here. You've all seen nest cams, I'm sure, and this of course isn't going to work for me. But basically during the day, you've got plenty of light in the cavity, in the nest box. And so you can just put a regular camera in there and film the activity. But Odile was really interested in the nighttime incubation, because at night is when females have to sit on the nest all night long. They do not get off the nest. They can't see. So getting off the nest is like a death sentence for the female. She has to sit there until it gets light again, which means that her activity on the nest during that time when it's also coldest is really important. If she's not settled on the eggs, then she's not incubating properly. So what Odile did is took our standard nest box, and then we modified the tops of these boxes so we could put this little infrared spy cam in there. And these are the kind of pictures, videos that you're going to see in a second. So they're not as clear, obviously, as they might be with a regular camera, but you can see what's going on. Here's a female. Here's her head turned back, and her beak is tucked sort of near her wing. She's sleeping. This is what they sleep with, their little heads tucked under their wing. They're even cute when they're in the box and they're sleeping. Ridiculously cute birds. And when they're awake and restless, we could also tell this female is awake and she's a little bit up out of the nest cup, as is this one. And so we can tell when they're active, restless, perhaps not maintaining as much contact between her belly and the egg. So in this video, this shows something that we discovered. We weren't really thinking about it, although we should have. If you can see this little shadowy mosquito flying around in the nest box. Of course, it's Florida, right? There's got to be mosquitoes at night. And they like the warm nest box, and it makes them probably more active than they would be outside the box on a cool evening. And so this mosquito is attacking this female and keeping her awake. And she's sitting on the eggs, though, quite tightly and just snapping at the mosquito. She's moving her head, but her body is actually making good contact with the eggs. There are a lot of other behaviors that we see in the nest at night. So if you look at the top left here, again, this is a sleeping bird. She's generally not very restless. She's not getting up. She's not doing anything fancy. She's just tucking her head and trying to sleep. The bird on the top right is quite agitated. Right there, she's actually turning her eggs, which is a very important thing that females have to do. They need to turn the eggs to make sure the cold sides get exposed to her belly on a regular basis. But like any other activity that brings her up off the eggs, if she's doing that all night long because she can't sleep, that's not going to be good. And the same as this bird here on the bottom, she's preening. She wakes up and she starts preening her feathers. And she's also, as you can see, there's a gap under her. She's not as tightly settled on the eggs as the sleeping bird is. So all these are normal behaviors. But what we found is that in noisier boxes, you end up getting more activity. So the y-axis in both of these graphs is activity level, any kind of motion that the females are doing. And as mosquitoes go up, you get more activity, but only that one kind, the little head turns that she does to snap at the mosquitoes. But when you add noise to the mix, you're getting a whole bunch of other activities that are much more frequent in addition to mosquitoes. So you're getting a lot of activity in the nest boxes. With mosquitoes and with noise, it's even worse. Now, this graph isn't super clear, but just focus on the green line here. On this axis is hatching success. So just a measure of an index of hatching success on the left. So the green line is increasing. And this is really quiet boxes where there's absolutely no noise, and an increasing number of mosquitoes. So it's funny that where you have the most mosquitoes attacking the females, you also have the highest nesting success. So there's two ways to explain that. One is that where there's more mosquitoes, there's probably more grassy area, more habitat for the bluebirds, more insects in general. So during the day, she might be getting more food, and so she can sit on the eggs more tightly in habitats with more insects. It's just a guess. But then the fact that there's more insects actually in the box bothering her, it just means that the activity that she engages in to kill the insects is something that does not take away from incubating the eggs. But the orange line is actually really noisy boxes that also get a lot of insects, a lot of mosquitoes in the box. And there you get the lowest hatching success of all. So a female that's trying to catch bugs and can't sleep otherwise because of the noise, that bird is not going to raise very many baby bluebirds. So it's really about the noise, not more than the mosquitoes, because just mosquitoes in a quiet area, it's not a problem for hatching success. I don't know what that was. Sorry. Female incubation behavior is the key to hatching success, right? Bluebirds. So what we know then is that bluebirds nest in both noisy and quiet areas, but they do worse in noisy areas. Noise keeps the females at night, especially, that keeps them awake and moving. And this decreases the nest temperature, causes egg development failure, and this leads to reduced reproductive success. So it's not going to drive them extinct, probably, but it is a serious issue if you're dealing with an environment where you have a lot of noise and a lot of grassland, and you would like to have a lot of birds there. It would be better to know that they were happy and healthy. Now, about the mosquito thing, why are they okay with mosquitoes if that doesn't affect them as much? If you think about it, bluebirds and mosquitoes have co-evolved with each other for quite a long time. And so it makes sense that the bluebird actually can deal with mosquitoes at the same time as raising kids effectively. So they've evolved the behavior to deal with the mosquito, and that's just that little snapping of the beak, and they turn their heads, but they don't come up off the eggs. But the noise is a relatively new thing from an evolutionary standpoint, and they're not used to it yet. In fact, people aren't used to it yet. We subject ourselves over and over to damaging levels of noise without thinking about the consequences, when we probably should be. So in the grand evolutionary scheme, it would be nice if we could make our the areas where we live and work a lot quieter. Of course, that would be a lot better for wildlife too that likes to live with us. So that's kind of explains why the bluebirds, they can't really handle the noise. That keeps them up. But the stuff that they have to do to control mosquitoes, it's something they've been doing for a really long time, and they're pretty good at it. So what is a landscaper to do for their clients who love birds and want lots of bluebirds? If they're ever asked about that, first of all, there's a lot of things I could say here, but I'll just sort of summarize what's best for the bluebirds. And just having them on your property it's a gift. They're just adorable birds. They're so sweet. Like I said, they don't really have any annoying traits other than being ridiculously cute. So bluebirds will nest in noisy areas, but you shouldn't put boxes in really noisy areas. Okay, so do them a favor and help them by keeping boxes in quiet areas where they will do better. And in a home landscape situation, that just means more than like 50 meters from a house. That's where they're going to be happiest. They won't be disturbed by your activity. You can still see them, but I'll talk about how to get them closer in a minute. But if you're near a really busy road, and even a country road at night that gets truck traffic, we were watching bluebirds on videos at night on really like small country roads, but where there'd be big trucks coming like every 10 minutes. And you watch the female, she's sleeping quietly. And then the truck, you can hear the truck coming in the distance. She starts to wake up. And when the truck is passing, she's up off the eggs. She's looking around. She can't sleep. And then the truck leaves and she goes back to bed. She sits on the eggs and gets settled in there. Then the next truck comes. Every single truck gets her up off the eggs. The eggs cool down, and that's a problem. So even if you're on a pretty small country road, I would keep the nest boxes away from those country roads if trucks are passing at night. So 400 meters is basically where the noise drops to a low level, no matter what kind of road it is. 400, 500 meters for a freeway even is plenty quiet enough. You also want to use a proper nest box. There's a lot of crazy, crafty, weird nest boxes out there you want to avoid if you actually want birds that are healthy. I found this thing. You can pay $350 for this box. And yeah, it's the size and everything a bluebird might use, but it's metal. If you put that up in Florida, the birds are going to cook inside of there. I mean, literally, you'll get scrambled bluebird eggs. So don't use that. And then this other box here on the left, this blue one, it's not a terrible box in and of itself because it's nice and roomy on the bottom, but they've placed it on a structure that's easy to climb by any kind of predator that wants to get into that box. So it's not very attractive, but this setup on the right-hand side is really what you want for a bluebird box. No matter what kind of box is at the top of the pole, a predator exclusion device of some effective tested quality right below it is really important. And you can see this rat snake is climbing right up, but it's not going to get past this baffle. That's just aluminum flashing that's put around the post. It's hung around the post, and I imagine it's stuffed with something like chicken wire to keep the snakes and raccoons and everybody, and rats too, in some environments can climb up into these boxes and cause trouble. So you really want to try to keep the climbing animals off. And I usually just grease my poles with axle grease, but that's super messy. It's better if you can build an actual baffle like this. It keeps the predators out. So, I mean, it's not the prettiest thing, right? The blue box is prettier and this little metal box is quite cute. But for the bird's sake, please choose an approved nice box and manage it in a way so there's nothing touching the pole. It's out near grassy areas and it's protected from predators if you have predators in the area. And there's a lot more insights about how to do this online. Just stay away from the weird cutesy boxes. You know, if you're going to put up a box like this, you should block the hole so nothing actually tries to nest in it. Nobody's going to nest right next door to another bluebird. I mean, anyway, they're cute, but some of these box designs will certainly not be attractive to the birds, and some of them could actually kill the chicks in some ways. So you should be a little careful about what you choose. Now, one way that you can go overboard with the birds is with feeders. Bluebirds love a good feeder that's stuffed with dried mealworms. And so you can go crazy with the feeders. You can put those right by your windows. You can put them right up close to the house. The birds will come in and eat these mealworms. And now there's all these really cool bird cams that you can get that are sitting right in front of the box. And you can get, you know, just facial expressions. I mean, here's a whole brood. Good gosh, that looks like several broods stuffing their faces on mealworms with half-grown chicks in tow. So it's just a super fun bird to have around. But the nesting, you have to think about where they're nesting and be a little bit careful with how you manage the nesting boxes. So there's a lot more I could say about this, but if you're interested, check out everything that the North American Bluebird Society says about how to manage nest boxes on properties. We have our own Florida Bluebird Society. It's a really great group of people who meet a couple times a year, I think, and talk about bluebirds in the Florida landscapes. And of course, there's tons of info online about monitoring nest boxes. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. And I'm happy to take questions if we have a way to do that. Trying to find my Zoom box again. Here we are. Yeah. All right, so stopping share. Okay, so that's it. Do I have any questions or time for questions?
Waiting to see if William comes back, and there he is.
We are. Katie, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. We do have some questions. I've got some questions live here in the audience. I have one quick question for you, because you alluded to the issue with house cats or feral cats and birds, and I know that is a staggering number. Approximately how many birds are lost to cats every year?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's uncountable. I could talk a lot about that issue. Honestly, I'm not as much of a vigilante against cats as some of my wildlife loving colleagues are. Most birds, I mean, yeah, if you have a cat and you also have a wren nest and the wrens fledge, the babies are going to get eaten by cats. But are wrens endangered? No, they're really not. So having cats in the urban suburban environments probably is not that big a problem, just because the birds that also live there are pretty savvy about cats, honestly. Yes, some of the kids will get eaten, but they also are really common birds with high reproductive rates. Cats are an absolute no-no, however, anywhere where you have, on islands and other places where you have endangered species. Cats should not be allowed to roam free. And in general, I think the better rule to think about for your house cats is honestly cat density around places where people live and where they may have bird boxes and bird feeders and so forth. Maintaining a low cat density of free roaming cats is really the most important thing. If there's one or two cats, in your immediate neighborhood that roam free, the birds are going to know where those cats are all the time, and they aren't going to be bothersome to the people that live there. But if there's 6 cats sitting on my car in the morning when I go out, I mean, that's just overboard, right? Certainly going to overwhelm the birds as well. So, it's a complicated issue. I don't want to say anything bad about cat ladies, because cat ladies they love cats, and that's, what's wrong with loving something.
Katie, if is there something you can do to a bird box to keep the cats out? I mean, do the cats get the live birds going in and out? Pounce on them?
No, they can't do that. They won't do that typically, but you should have those excluders on there if you have a kitten that's really good at climbing. But when they get them is when the fledglings are out, and the young birds are so stupid, they don't know anything. So they'll just jump on the ground and get nabbed. So you could, if you see the box is going to fledge soon, then keep your cats in for a few days while the babies are really stupid. That would be a good thing to do.
Excellent. And I do have a question here from Ms. December.
I see a lot of starlings all over the place, and I would like to encourage some bluebird boxes, but I don't know how to exclude the starlings from the bluebird box.
So,
can you put up hundreds?
Yeah, I couldn't hear that.
okay, I'll repeat it for you. December was asking, she wants to encourage bluebirds, but is concerned about the starlings. So I know you had mentioned about monitoring the boxes, and I didn't know if that was partly what you're monitoring for. What can somebody do who wants to attract bluebirds, and how would you go about excluding the starlings that are likely to move in?
Yeah, so yeah, if you live near any kind of ranch land or large open pastures, especially cattle operations and things like that, you're going to have a lot of starlings around, and they can be a problem. And if you go online and look up starling proof nest box for bluebirds, you'll find ways to do it. There's ways to put certain types of wire mesh around the opening that might discourage them. But also, if you want to put bluebirds on, just visit the boxes in the springtime. You'll know when things are happening, because the bluebirds will start sitting on the boxes and they'll sing from them and defend them. And at that point, just keep an eye on it. And if you see starlings around there, if the starlings start a nest, you can kind of throw their nest out if you want. It feels kind of mean, but sometimes we have to choose one species over another, and that's one way to do it. But there are ways to design the box that will discourage starlings. So you can look those up online. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you very much. And I know, Katie, from the paper you sent me, the research paper that was kind of the genesis of this presentation, when I read it, I saw a whole lot more information in there that you weren't able to get into today, as far as how the birds call out warnings to other birds.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was, we were thinking of a different topic at that point. So.
Well,
yeah.
What we will do is we will put a link on our webpage to that paper. So those of you that are interested, there's a tremendous amount more information that Katie's group has put together. So if you have an interest to dive way more deeply into this, go to our website and the paper will be linked there. We do have a couple more questions. I've probably only got time for one more. Bob, Mr. Shankwaller.
Yeah, the problem with mosquitoes, because that's being noise flying past them, that's very noisy when it goes past your ear. And the other question is, it might be a midnight snack and they love them.
So I don't know if you can hear Bob, but he is certainly, like we all are, if you hear a mosquito buzz by, it may not be terribly loud, but yeah, you got to wake up and do something about it. And the other was maybe the food source, like you said, the midnight raid of the mosquito refrigerator.
Yeah, my student, she showed me a few videos where the birds actually got mosquitoes, they would eat them. And I imagine they're pretty good at getting them and eating them for the most part. We never saw more than 5 mosquitoes in a nest box at one time, which is a lot. I know I wouldn't be able to sleep with that. But the thing about the mosquitoes seems to be that the females, they don't get that upset about it. They don't get that restless. They just snap at them and then try to go back to sleep without actually getting up off the eggs. So in terms of reproductive success, it does not seem to disrupt them. But I suppose if she had 10 insects in there, it could get pretty bad. And then the other thing is maybe they do better with more insects because they actually are really good at getting them all and eating them. And then she's feeling pretty good and settled with a full stomach, she goes to sleep. So we don't know the answer to that. Those are good questions. But one thing I do know is that with climate change, people who monitor mosquito populations the world over, and especially in places like this, the sort of global density of mosquitoes in the air is increasing as the temperatures increase around the world. So what benefit or cost that's going to have to our wildlife, I don't really know, but I know it's probably going to bother us a lot.
Excellent. Well, again, we thank you very much. We truly appreciate you taking the time. I am going to ask you to hang on for a minute because when we bring Amir on, since you cracked the code of how to get your share screen to work, we want to make sure Amir can as well. So
Okay, I'll stay.
but we thank you. So
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
Can we go ahead and switch
Sure.
to
Let me,
Amir?
find Amir. Amir is a co-host, so Amir, if you're there, you could probably jump in.
It doesn't say co-host on him.
Doesn't?
No, it does not.
Well, that's crazy talk.
And since you have to do it, you have to do it.
I thought I had done this, but yes, you're right. There we go. Maybe you know what happened is I made him co-host and then he bailed out and came back in. All right, so Amir, you should be able to hear us now.
Yes, I'm able. Yeah.
Excellent. And did you want to do a quick test to see if you can share your stuff? Looks good to me. All right.
Okay.
So, Katie, thank you so much. You can step away and if you'll give me a moment, I can introduce Amir. And Amir, forgive me, I'm going to do my best. Amir Rezazadeh, did I say that
Yes,
right?
correct. Yes.
Is the multi-county fruit and field crops agent. Before his appointment with the UF IFAS extension, he worked as a postdoctoral associate with Mississippi State University Coastal Research and Extension Center. There, Rezazadeh, sorry about that. I'm going to just say Amir, worked alongside fruit growers to improve yield and post-harvest sustainability for blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, and grapes. He holds a PhD in horticulture from Mississippi State University, and his doctorate work focused on the influence of environmental factors and cultural practices in the development of greenhouse crops. After he completed his master's in horticulture, he oversaw more than 100 acres of grapefruit and mandarin trees and managed 10 employees for more than 5 years. With that, I will hand this over to Amir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, my name is Amir Rezazadeh, and I'm a fruit and alternative crops agent in San Lucie County and Indian River. So I'm working for 2 counties. Today we're going to talk about the fig, but before starting talking about the fig in Florida, let's introduce you to Ask IFAS website. It's a great website inside the University of Florida website. So if you just search it in Google, you will find it. It's a first search result. So there is a search box in the middle. If you just search any word like a fig, avocado, anything, you will see the publication of the specialist of University of Florida in this website. So it's a reliable resource for any topics that you're looking for. So let's talk about the fig. So, well, the scientific name of fig is Ficus carica. It's part of the family of Moraceae. And fig actually originated from the old world tropics, such as the Mediterranean area and Southeast Asia or South Asia. Well, probably we can't call them tropics now because of some climate change, but in Mediterranean, fig has been there probably from 5000 BCE, but it came to Florida or the US in 1575 by a Spanish explorer. I guess it's just came to San Augustine or in those areas, but I'm not sure. So in that time, the Spanish explorer imported figs that needed pollination. And usually the fig tree need fig wasp for pollination. So the first attempt of importing figs to Florida just failed because we don't have that fig wasp in Florida. After that, they tried to import fig wasp. So it worked for a limited time, but because it's not a native area for fig wasp, so again, that project failed. But after a couple of time, they just tried to import the fig that do not need any pollination, that we call them parthenocarpic figs. So we will talk about that. But in general, fig trees, I mean the fig trees that are edible, they need at least 100 hours of chill, hundreds of chill hour. So this chill hours is temperature below 45 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not that accurate, but it's close to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And so trees accumulate these hours during the winter. So probably one day we have 2 hours of under 45, one day we have 4 hours. So they accumulate until they get 100 or close to 100 hours. And then they develop some flowers for the next season. So this is the information of the chill hours I got from Fawn Weather website. You can just all of you have access to this website, Fawn Weather. You see that for Broward County so far, I mean until now we had just 18 hours chilling. So and it's almost terrible for fig because it doesn't meet actually the requirement, chilling hour requirement for fig. But take a look at the box of in the top. You see that it says historic average was 62 hours. So you see the direct effect of climate change. But the last season you had 11 hours. So it's a little bit better this year, so a little bit cooler, but it's not enough. Let's go to San Lucie County, the county that I'm here. So far we had 75 chilling hours. Still, it's not enough. But the historic average was 163. You see how much change. You see in last season, we had 82 hours. So it's getting warmer and warmer every year. Let's go to Osceola County. You see, so far we have 120 hours of chilling. So it means that this area is good for fig. And of course, their historic average was 219 hours. So any area in Florida or in the world are getting warmer. So does it affect fig trees to produce fruits? Of course, but when you don't have enough chilling hour close to that requirement, doesn't mean that you can't grow that tree. You can grow it in your area, but probably you won't see enough or as much as fruit that you could have in north of Florida. So take a look at this map. You see that Florida is in a subtropic area. And we are almost in the same level of Middle East or Mediterranean area, but a little bit warmer. So Mediterranean area are a little bit higher as Florida. And you see in this map, this is the USDA temperature zone. You see that we are in zone 10. It means that let me see, average annual low is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And even the north of Florida is zone 9. But in all documents, fig is recommended to be planted in zone 8 to 10. It means that fig needs a little bit chilling hours. So if you just shift to some native fig of Florida, we see there are 2 species native to the United States, the Florida strangler fig or Ficus aurea, and also the short leaf fig, also called giant birded fig. Most of them needs pollination and also fig wasp. So I'm not sure, maybe we have different type of fig wasp for these trees here in Florida that is different than the fig wasp of edible figs. And this is a picture of short leaf fig or bearded fig leaf. Both of them are landscape plants and they're very tall. And so the goal of this presentation was to make you familiar with pollination of figs, especially in landscape figs. So let's take a look at this picture. In general, fig species are either monoecious, that are 52% of the figs, and these, this category bearing ciconia containing individual male and female flowers at the same time. So ciconia is the fruits of fig. That flowers are also inside the ciconia. But as also we have gynodicius, that is 40% of the fig, goes to this category. So these plants bearing ciconia with either only functional female flowers, or we have another group inside the gynodicius that have male and female flowers at the same time. So let's go to another slide. So which category is the edible fig? Well, it's interesting. Edible fig is not in none of those categories. We have another category called parthenocarpic, varieties. It means that these varieties do not need any pollination, do not need any wasp for pollination. So they actually make a fruit without pollination and without using any wasp. It's almost same as navel oranges. They don't need any pollination, so there's no seeds. Of course, in some area of the world, they are still planting some fig trees that needs pollination, but not in Florida. So this graph or this picture shows you how fig trees need wasps for pollination. So I'm going to just briefly, explain it, but I will have a short video in the next slide that, show you this pollination process very well. So in general, the female wasp goes inside the ostiole of any ciconia and lay eggs. And after that, the eggs hatch, and because there are most of the time these fruits have both male and female flowers. So when they're gonna babies, when they're gonna just exit from this ostiole or from the whole of this ciconia, they just some pollen stick to their body, and when they just exit from the cyclonia, they're just carrying some pollen to the other fruits. So this is the process, briefly process of the, laying egg inside, and the next generation actually just doing the process and carrying the pollens. But let's take a look at or watch this video. It's very short, 4 minutes. It explained very well, so probably you get the clue.
High up in Borneo's canopy, you'll find a fig tree living in symbiosis with an outlandish wasp. One who is willing to sacrifice her own life.
I just want to make sure that, do you have the audio for this video or not?
Yes,
It
we can
sounded
hear.
like it was coming through fine.
Yeah, we're good. It sounds great. Thank you.
To assure the survival of her offspring. Competing million years.
Well, it's interesting, process, and probably if you remember, I just talked about the different type of strangler fig. Some of them, just have female and male flower, and some of them have just female flower. So the question is now how these wasps, know that in which flower they need to go for pollination and laying egg. And the researchers just find out that those, fig trees with a female and male flowers just release some compounds to guide these fig wasps to their flowers and fruits. So it's a close relationship with them, and I don't know, it's a nature, or after years they develop to attract these fig wasps. So they know how to do this during the years. And there's one myth that people don't eat fig fruits because I have heard that from so many people, because they think that there are wasps inside the fig fruits. But 100% I will assure you that the new varieties do not need any pollination, and most of them, or all of them, are just parthenocarpic varieties now here in Florida. So let's talk a little bit about the fig trees, or the fruit, the fig trees that produce fruits for us. So the fig trees is dioecious tree. Sometimes they can reach to 50 feet in some Mediterranean area, but in Florida they just get to 25 feet, and it's because most of the time the fig trees here have lots of branches and they don't have central leader. So most of the time they are like this picture. So small branches tend to be more peaty than woody, and another characteristic of fig is that they have a very strong root system. And also, the one thing that you need to know, they produce the compounds like a latex that irritate the skin. So this enzyme in their latex is very similar to the latex in papaya. So both of them just irritate the skin. And also, let's go to back. Okay. So if you remember, I said that most of the fig trees that we eat the fruits are from another category. We call them common figs. And these are the most popular varieties of figs that mostly we see it in Mediterranean area and also in Florida. So brown turkey is the most popular one. Celeste fig is the next one, Brunswick fig, and also the Mijan. These four are the most common and popular fig varieties in US and also the Mediterranean area. But if you want to, or as a commercial producer, if you want to choose the varieties, what would you consider? Well, first of all, it should be cold hardiness. Or cold hardy, especially if you are in north of Florida and you have freezing, because it happens many times that after winter, after prolonged freezing, the most of the shoots or a stem of fig just die, and it's, you know, renew and, you know, grow and the new shoots again. So that's why in north of Florida or northern state, people say that don't start pruning, because in the winter all of them will die and they will, you know, emerge again. So it's just waste of time. And also another point is that either if there are parthenocarpic varieties or not, this is very important because we don't have VASP here. If they have closed eye or ostial or not, because in Florida, because of this, you know, humidity, we have lots of pests and disease. The pressure of pests are very high here. So we're gonna have varieties that have closed eye to just, you know, protect the fruits from any small insects. And another point to choose the variety is the green skin is so much better, because most of the purple skins varieties attract birds. And I have heard from many producers or many homeowners that have figs that most of the fruits are eaten by birds instead of, you know, the owners. So just imagine for a commercial grower how devastating would be. So one of the, you know, non-purple skins variety is Alma. It has a high yield, medium-sized fruit. It's very sweet, and it's you know, ripened from July to August. Brown turkey is the most popular. It's a medium large, very sweet. It's also has a harvest time of July to August. And also just take a look at the beautiful skin color. Maybe this is one of the reasons that it's very popular. We have the Celeste too. Probably it's the same picture as brown turkey. Yes. They have also the brown purple skin. This picture is for brown turkey, so you just ignore the picture. They have cold hardiness. They are cold hardy, so they're good for north of Florida, but the fruits are small and medium. It's very good for shipping and for also processing, making jam. They are a little bit early season, and they ripen in July. And the propagation of the fig are very easy, just using the dormant cuttings. In the winters, the stem should be 6 inches long and less than 1 inch in the diameter. So we usually choose from the 2 years old wood or a stem. So we just cut them, remove all leaves, and put them in a perlite or any loosened, you know, media for propagation. You can just, you know, put the branches in half of them in a, you know, media. And probably in the winter or now, you'll see the new buds. Most of the time, you don't need any hormones because it's very easy for propagation. If you are looking for planting figs in your backyard or as a commercial scale, it should be planted in a full sun location. Most of the time, they just provide the shade and compete with the other plants under them. So it's not a good idea to plant anything under these figs. And also, sometimes that we prune hardly these fig trees, they will get the sun scale. So to just control this problem in a commercial scale, they just paint the leaves or you know, the stems. It's a washable paint, of course. And what is the best time for you know, for propagation? The best time is just in winter. And for the, you know, commercial scale planting, the space of 10 to 16 feet is good. And I mean, the row and the between plants should be something like a 13 to 20 feet. And when is the best time for harvest, for pruning? Well, as I said, in it, nature, the fig trees have a lots of branches. So for commercial scale for your backyard, it's better to have a central leader. What is the best time for pruning? It's right after harvesting the fruits. And you can just, so when you just buy the fig trees from the nursery, most of the time they have trim the trees, the small trees, so that you need just central leader. So if you don't prune it or trim it in the next years, you're going to have lots of suckers and lots of branches in the base. So you need to just keep the trees with a central leader all the time. We have some trees here in our office. I'm just removing those suckers almost every 2 weeks. It produces lots of suckers and new shoots, new stems. And other things, it's a tree that doesn't need pruning for, making, making a rounded shape, because it's already, have a rounded shape. The pruning is just for trimming it to, get the central leader. That's it. It's a tree that, very, well known as a low fertilizer tree. You don't have to fertilize a lot. Just after planting the trees and buying from the nursery planting, you just need to add fertilizer after 3 weeks or 1 month. You can use just 10-10-10, complete fertilizer, and just half a pound for the new trees is enough. And as long as the tree grows and gets older and get mature, you can just increase it. For some mature trees, you can just add 2 to 4 pounds of 10-10-10 fertilizer. Just remember, this tree doesn't need a lot of nitrogen because it stimulates vegetative growth, and it stops plants to produce fruit. So just low nitrogen fertilizer. It needs a lot of water, especially during the producing fruits. Other than in the dormant season, I don't have to irrigate. So the question is, why we don't have any fig trees in Florida, or at least why people are afraid of planting figs? Well, first reason, I just remember, as far as I know, people think that there are wasps inside the figs, so people just ignore this tree to plant. When people's knowledge gets higher, they know that there's no need for pollination for fig trees in Florida. When they go to the nursery, most of the nurseries say that there is a root knot problem, nematode problem here in Florida. And it's right, because we have a sandy soil here in Florida, and root knot nematode is a big problem in Florida. So it doesn't mean that you can't control it. Of course, you can control. If you just have one fig trees, you can just plant it, dig a hole, and mix the hole with actually the organic material or with garden soil. It's 50-50 with sand and garden soil, because the nematodes hate organic material. So it can control a little bit the nematode problem. Another solution for fig trees in Florida, you can just plant it in a container. Of course, you're going to have a smaller, trees, but it's a tree that doesn't need a lot of fertilizer. And for the home use, you're going to have enough fruits in the container, so you shouldn't have any problem. And of course, we have the chilling hour problem in the south. That there's no solution for that. But if you live in north of Florida or central Florida, you shouldn't have any problem. And another, common problem of fig in Florida is fig rot. It's a, fungus disease. Most of the figs in Florida get this disease because of the humid weather. You see brown spots or dots, both under leaves and upper leaves area. And one of the reason is humidity. And so in a commercial scale, the fig growers use fungicide every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. So most of the time they use copper fungicide to control this, especially during the fruit season. And for example, from April to November, when they start producing flowers, fruit, and until the harvest, or after that, you need to just spray it. It happened also for mango trees. We have anthracnose, or that is the fungus disease. It's necessary to spray copper fungicide or any fungicide that is registered for this kind of disease all the time, every 2 weeks. So don't be afraid of planting figs. We have a great temperature. We have a great climate here in Florida. Just you need to just control the nematodes, fig rust, and also the lower chill hours doesn't stop fig to produce fruit. It's just you're just not gonna have enough as much as fruit that you will have in north of Florida. That's it. So with that in mind, it was the last slide, and I can't take any question. I'm just stopping sharing, and so I'm here to answer the question if there is any.
Amir, thank you. That was excellent. I do have a couple questions. I was Googling while you were talking. Amir, what we call the Green Island ficus is the Ficus microcarpa. And it is on the list as a Florida #1 invasive, but yet we don't have a problem. And I was told earlier on, the reason we don't have a problem with the Green Island ficus being invasive is because that wasp that you were showing us does not live down here, or why is not the Ficus microcarpa, the Green Island ficus, invasive here? I should ask you. You're the expert.
So you say that you don't have that wasp in that area?
Right. I don't know that we do or we don't, but we grow a lot of Green Island ficus, which is the Ficus microcarpa. But it that I know of. I'm gonna look at the room. I don't think it goes to seed.
Right. Probably the reason is that you don't have that wasp in your area, and people just propagate it through the vegetative propagation, and maybe there is not any seed. But there shouldn't be any other reason other than that. And also, these fruits are a little bit, I guess, big to be, spread by wind. So probably birds can just scatter these, seeds to other area. But the only reason is maybe there is not any wasp for that special variety. For example, for strangler feed, we have that wasp here in this area, but for the other edible figs, probably we don't have that, fig wasp. So I guess that I don't have the, exactly the right answer, but I guess that this is because of that fig wasp.
We have a couple people that may have some answers. So Donna, who is also with the university. I don't know, Amir, if you could hear, but she was saying, the strangler fig does grow throughout Florida and is a problem down here. So she's feeling we must have the wasp because they certainly produce a number of berries. I guess I was just primarily asking about what we call Green Island ficus and not had a problem with it. We have, go ahead.
But
So, Amir, I don't know if you could hear the question, the sad story. The wasp, once it goes in to pollinate the fig, so it never exits there again. Does it just decay in the fruit?
Yes, actually, yeah. If you just watch the movie, the female wasp just trapped inside the fruit, so yeah, they decay. And this is one of the reasons that people don't like figs, especially the varieties that needs pollination. But I'm not sure the wasp that pollinate that strangler fig is, same as the fig wasp that, pollinate those edible figs. If they are same, I assume that they are the wasps that those, Spanish explorer or the people that brought those figs for the first time in Florida, and after that they brought some fig wasps. So they just brought those wasps, and now they're available in Florida. They can just pollinate just a strangler fig or any landscape figs here, or short leaf, short breadleaf figs. But you don't have to worry about the edible figs, because we don't grow any of those fig varieties that needs pollination. And it's like I can say that it's like a seedless and seeded grape variety. Long time ago we had most of the grapes were seeded varieties, but because people don't like them, they just started growing seedless grapes. And now you barely see seeded grapes in the grocery store because people don't like it. And it's same as fig. People, express that feeling that they don't like the figs, that there is a dead wasp inside, or there are some figs, eggs inside. So that's why you shouldn't be worried about the edible one. But for the strangler fig, they need pollination.
Well, I will tell you a quick story. For those of you that know Dr. Kaler, Dr. Phil Kaler, who is up at the university, and he's an insect specialist. He used to be down here. I knew him when he was down in Broward County. When we were active with the Florida Pest Control Association at the time, we had a dinner, and he was the speaker, and we had dinner, and he made sure that on the menu was chocolate cake, and nobody objected, so we had chocolate cake. He waited till people were about half done at the end. He said, I do want to start off his presentation. So we'll start off my presentation by telling you, is anybody allergic to chocolate? One or two people raised their hand. He said, well, you know what the funny part is? You're really not allergic to chocolate. You're allergic to roaches. It's just that chocolate has the highest allowable percentage of roach feces and feces of any food source. So if you're allergic to chocolate, you're really allergic to roaches. So I would
You just ruined chocolate for me, damn you.
Before I would worry about that, before a chocolate bar and the feces and feces in the chocolate. Dr. Kaler.
Is that a true story?
And we're passing around chocolate kisses here. So if any of you break out at hives. So Amir, I do want to change, because I know you're also a citrus expert. And Amir, what would you recommend for dooryard citrus? I mean, what can you give us 2 minutes on some good recommendations, so we know as what would be some good choices to recommend to people?
Right. Okay, let's just talk about the citrus greening. It's a bacterial disease that, the vector is tiny insects. We call it Asian citrus psyllid. So this insect is everywhere in Florida. And right now, almost 90% of the citrus trees in Florida are infected with citrus greening. That is a bacterial disease. And so far, we don't have any cure for this disease. The only things that the researchers are doing, and some growers are doing, is just injecting antibiotic to the trees, but you need to do it forever, and it's not effective 100%. And also, we don't have any resistant variety. It's just some varieties are tolerant. So it means that I can't recommend anything, that will be healthy forever in your backyard. Some varieties are more susceptible to citrus greening. Some varieties are less susceptible to citrus greening. For example, grapefruit are more susceptible. Some oranges, like a sugar bell, they say that it's a little bit more tolerant to citrus greening, but there is new orange, they call it Sun Dragon orange. It's released by USDA. It's a little bit more tolerant. Some grapefruit that they call it a Star Ruby, it's a little bit more tolerant. So if you want to go with them. And among the lemons and limes, a Mayer lemon, it's more tolerant to citrus greening, but all of them can be infected with citrus greening. So we usually just recommend go to the certified nursery and buy disease-free, citrus trees. But as soon as you just planted your citrus trees in your backyard, it just takes less than 6 months to for that tree to get infected with citrus greening, because that insect is everywhere, disease is everywhere. And probably you won't see any symptoms in next 2 years, but after that you will see some blotchy mottle and some spots, yellowish spot on the leaves. And after that, the tree gets weaker and weaker because the root system just damaged by this bacteria. And during the first 3 or 4 years that tree start to produce fruit, most of those fruits just drop. And we are seeing all of this problem in a commercial scale. I just saw something like 1,000 acres of oranges. They just planted 4 years ago, sugar beet, and they wanted to harvest fruits last year, but almost 90% of the fruit just dropped. So for recommendation, if I'm going to be honest, I don't recommend citrus right now, because we don't have any resistant variety.
That is very interesting and rather disheartening, from Florida and the wonderful varieties of oranges that have been here for a number of years. I certainly hope there's a solution down the road. We have a couple questions. December.
I have to. I thought last year we had to figure out this problem, but nature finds the way. And we've seen that with a lot of different infestations, with a lot of different things. So let's stop trying to solve the problem and let's accept that there is an issue right now and move on to something else and let nature fix the problem.
I don't know if you could hear, but I think what I'll rephrase that a little bit, December. I think what one of our members here is saying, that hopefully no one disease will wipe out an entire species of plant. That there will be some that survive, and in the future there will be the return of the citrus, and hopefully we can, or nature can, over time, work to resolve this speed bump, if that's what it works out to be. Yes, Rose.
Yes, we just had Water Matters Day, and Dr. Ruth Borger from the Citrus Research Center came. We gave away 200 of the new University of Florida hybrid sugar bells out for Water Matters Day this year. Again, they're not resistant, but they are tolerant. But the university is researching which one of those plants are more resistant. They're working on that handle of it from that perspective, and we're anxious to see how those did. Anybody that was to get a citrus tree at Water Matters Day, though, had to sit down through a workshop and presentation by the professors to explain all about citrus camphor and citrus greening and how to best take care of the plants and plant them. So we're hopeful.
So Amir, that was another hopeful passage, and that is one of our members here is in charge of Florida Water Matters Day for Broward County, which is at a park, and one of the biggest attractions they have out there is a tree giveaway to residents. And Rose, what do you give away? 1,000 trees a year? 3,000 trees.
Okay.
But because it's deserts and stuff in our communities, we do offer fruit trees as well. So we'll offer mangoes and carambolas and lychees and that sort of thing as well. but primarily we try and offer native trees and trees that might be native and endangered or rare in Florida that are harder for homeowners to get on their own. But we were very pleased to at least try and help resurrect the citrus industry a little bit by giving us a shot from researchers. So we're looking forward to that.
So of the 3,000 trees, Amir, Rose is saying that the university had a species which you called
It's sugar bell.
sugar bell.
Right.
And the university is hopeful that it's somewhat resistant, or nobody's saying it's proof, but somewhat tolerant of the disease. And it appears from what Rose is saying, the people that attended were anxious to get citrus. So there is a hope that citrus is going to make it back. And I agree with December. I think over time, there may be, because those of us that have been around here long enough realize how good it was to have a nice citrus tree in your yard and how well they fit in and just how Florida-ish they were and how great it was.
Yeah, we have to wait until they just develop resistant varieties. There are so many researchers and scientists working either in the University of Florida, USDA, or University of California. Most of them are working in the lab to develop a resistant variety, not tolerant. We have tolerant yet now. For example, that sugar bill or sun dragon, all of them are tolerant, but still they get citrus greening. And I have seen the orchard or groves that have sugar bill. Still, they have lots of symptoms. Their productivity is low, and they, the difference between the tolerant and no tolerant trees is just they show less symptoms, but the no tolerant trees they show a lot of symptoms. That's it. But when you look at this problem as a commercial grower, right now their profit margin or their profit getting almost half compared to 10 years ago, even with these tolerant varieties. And it's not the nature's fault. We brought this Asian citrus psyllid to Florida. We brought kudzu, we brought Brazilian pepper. And so nature cannot do anything because it's our fault. So we need to find another solution to just, fight with this problem.
Excellent. Well, Amir, again, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for taking time to speak with us. Very, very interesting. And we will look to having you back sometime.
Sure,
soon.
happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And to everyone that is still out there, thank you, Amir. To everyone that is still out there, thank you for attending the March meeting. One other one, Donna, we were supposed to announce there's a job opening at which county? In the extension service. We promised Mike we were going to announce that. Okay, don't tell Mike that we didn't announce this, but if you're interested in working for a county and extension service, look at their website because I know there are a couple available sites out there. All right. So that should wrap it up. Everybody have a great month. Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in April. Thank you. Did you